CareAsOne is committed to providing a unique virtual collaborative experience for healthcare professionals to come together to exchange information about U.S. healthcare through collaboration, conversation, and knowledge sharing. The Future of Health podcast provides a true infotainment service that helps the industry innovate by sharing expert voices, views, and advice on the important issues of the day. And now here's your host for The Future of Health, Dipti Desai.
Hello everyone, welcome to The Future of Health as CareAsOne. I'm Dr. Dipti Desai, the director of CareAsOne and the host of this podcast series. For those of you who are new to CareAsOne, it's a large virtual community that jumpstarts innovation acceleration by bringing together various stakeholders in the care cycle, from payers and providers to pharma and clinical researchers, startups, investors, universities, and more. The mission of CareAsOne is to truly accelerate innovation by creating a connected healthcare community where the patient is at the center of care. The entire ecosystem comes together through knowledge sharing with the help of healthcare luminaries like the one you will see today, thought leaders that will discuss the challenges, the gaps, solutions, and transformations that are essential for us to make healthcare whole again. This interaction and networking between the stakeholders is made possible through our community via summits, webinars, roundtables, leadership circles, and podcasts. And in today's podcast episode, I will be talking to Dr. Craig Richardville, Senior Vice President and Chief Information and Digital Officer at SCL Health. So, Craig is known for his innovative and transformational approaches in defining and driving the future of healthcare. And under his leadership, we have seen cloud first, mobile first, and patient first experiences that he has successfully created. His success is so huge that he has received CIO of the Year awards not once, not twice, but multiple times from Chime and HIMSS and also the state of Colorado. He is truly a national leader and an influencer in healthcare. And it is my honor and privilege to be talking to him today and hosting him. So, welcome, Craig, to our podcast. And to begin with, can you please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your journey, your role at SCL, and what you and your team focus on every day?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity and very gracious with your remarks. So thanks for that. First and foremost, I am the father of three boys, and that's my pride and joy. And when I leave this world, that's going to be my legacy. Is my contribution is going to be their contributions to the world. So very blessed and honored to have them as part of my family. In terms of the career, I started first in industry, manufacturing. I worked for a Marathon Oil Company, and I did programming and contract programming. And then I was trying to move forward with my graduate degree. And with that, I was traveling too much. So I had to, back then, they didn't have a lot of remote access to education. You had to be on site. So I wanted to go to some place that was more stable. And I moved into healthcare. And there I found just very exciting with a company called ProMedica Health, based out of Toledo, Ohio. And there we put in our first EMR. It was called the 3M Health System. We also did a lot of things in terms of stability of our network, moving things into that environment. We were very creative. And I moved out of IT and moved into another one of their subsidiaries on the for-profit side. We did work on the provider, medical group, ancillaries, and sold those services back. Just a really exciting part of a decade of my life. And then I wanted to move on to something different. So I moved into North Carolina. It was Carolina's healthcare system, now Atrium Health, for 20 years. I like to say there I've been with almost every size organization, because when I arrived there in 1997, we were 3 hospitals. And when I left, we were 42. And all of those were transitions in between. So I've been with small, medium, large, extra large, acquisitions, mergers, all different kinds of relationships throughout the Carolinas and some of the neighboring states. It was just a great opportunity. And then professionally, I also moved through my career in terms of being the CIO, then also the analytics officer, and combined those roles together. And I believe I was at that time the first and the only person with those two dual roles. But it was exciting. I was very privileged to give that opportunity, and it really kind of helped promote my view of what was happening out there, because that was when we started using data a lot more and moving data into the infrastructure of all of our decision making versus emotional or subjective, really looking at the facts and driving it that way. Then I took a year off, did a couple of things. I think we might talk about that a little bit later. And then I got into SCL Health. My first opportunity to be with a faith-based organization, truly somebody who lives the mission. Very exciting to be out here in the western part of the country. And here we started doing a lot of transformation. We really took what I would say would be a lower quartile type IT department into a top quartile, top decile. And all of our metrics have proven to be that be the case. And that only happens for two reasons. One is the people. So I had to bring in great people in order to do that work. And two is just the support of the organization, working as one team. None of those were IT projects. Those were all based upon SCL Health. Then you focus on what gets you up every day, and what's been consistent throughout those 30 years of my career, and it's been the patient. As long as you continue to keep that patient in the middle of all the work that you're doing, you will achieve great success.
So true, so true. And it's really interesting to see how, as you've developed and grown in your career, you've worn so many different hats and you have evolved and transformed yourself along with the organizations that you have transformed, right? And so, as you went through your career, I mean, you did a lot of different things. What to you has have been the most transformative phase in your career? Like, where did you think you made the most impact, and where do you think yourself going back to when you think about what you have accomplished?
Yeah, I tell you, there's been a lot of transformation. It's been fun. Some
Yeah.
some little bits of transitioning, kind of small incremental improvements, and all of a sudden big steps. Yeah, I look at the career of like a CIO, and back in the beginning, it was really just hardware, infrastructure, stability. Do you have a data center? Can you keep things up? Tools available? There really wasn't a lot of complexity to it, but it was very new. And then we moved into what I would call 2.0, which is where you started putting software in place. And that started kicking off right around Y2K. When you had to replace your systems, the EMR came out, the government incentives with the ERA Act came out, and people really started to automate the processes within healthcare. Other verticals have certainly gone through that process, but we moved in a short period of time because there was a set amount of years, there was incentives to get things up and going. And in order to receive those incentives, you had to achieve that kind of implementation in a short time. So that was fun. That was really kind of 2.0. You started changing workflows, changing how people were doing things. You gave them actually tools that they could use. And now we're kind of into 3.0 the last few years, moving into the data side and the digital side. And that's really kind of all the new stuff for me. Is really exciting to look to see what we do with that data. How do we use it? How do we digest it, bring it in? And that's kind of the new transformation now, is the digital and the acceleration with the pandemic. Those are all things now that kind of moves us into the 3.0. But you could go through Y2K for those of us that were around during that time. That was a big change. The EMR, as I mentioned, was a big change. When the iPhone and mobility started coming out, another great tool set to use. As cloud started coming out, all the data center stuff that kind of made you successful in the early part of your career, you had to disband and move away from. Pandemic was a great opportunity to really kind of automate a lot of that digital work. And now for me, we have a merger. We're on the verge of finalizing a merger April 1st. And I think that will be the most transformative part of my career, is taking two large successful organizations and bring them in as one, and that classic 1+1=3, and creating a product and a service for our markets and for our patients that will be a model for others to follow.
Yeah, no, I mean, your transformation journey has begun, but it's still on a rocket ship upwards, it looks like. And you mentioned so many different things like Y2K to EMR to digital transformation. It's interesting to see how healthcare has actually gone from that paper dossiers to everything on a computer, analog to digital in our lifetimes, and there's still a lot more to come. And you also alluded to one more thing, which is your merger. And I know you're still in the midst of it, so we won't talk much about it right now. But there's one thing, I mean, there's multiple reasons why people, two successful organization merge, right? There's the economies of scale you want to do, the ability to decrease unit cost, to improve productivity, and so many different reasons. But the most important then it boils down to is culture, right? And we noticed that, like you mentioned, some of the hospitals that you worked with, you actually helped them bring about the transformation. And they went from analog to digital very quickly, but others may have a different culture. So how does culture play a role into hospital systems when they're talking about different hospitals coming together? It's very important to make sure that that happens. How would you go about doing that? Is that something that keeps you up?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it keeps me up working, not up worrying. I think it's fun. So you're exactly right. I mean, culture. They always say culture eats strategy, and culture starts from the top. That tone is established from the top. And I have just been blessed throughout my career to have great CEOs in the organization, and I have one currently today with Lydia Jumanville and what she's been able to establish as the culture that allows us to be able to do the work. And then now with the future with Mark Harrison, the same thing. Mark has a huge vision around value, around population health, around lowering the cost of healthcare, allowing self-service, having people to have the right tools in their hands to help take care of themselves, to go at risk for actually providing that service so we can do it better, faster, and cheaper and pass those savings on. So it is something that is really exciting. And we've talked about it for a decade and a half. And he has a model that has been successful. And we're looking at seeing how we can continue to mold and grow that model and really, again, be something for others to follow and take a look at in different markets around the country. So I'm really excited about the value piece because the things that we do today, we're doing this for not only for our current patients, but hopefully the legacy for our children and our grandchildren, that they will have a different way of how they access healthcare, the delivery of healthcare, and its financing, that we can continue to make it reasonable, cost effective, accessible, and allow us to have high quality outcomes at the end.
Yeah, yeah. Moving from a business model of fee for service to value based care has been difficult for many organizations, and yet you've adopted it quite well. I mean, it's all about talking about innovation and invention, and that's something that you talk about a lot, right? And there is a difference between innovation and invention that many of us may not know about. So, can you expand on that? And also, I want to say, how can organizations be more innovative in order to get better patient experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people can debate back and forth. But the way I look at it is, an invention is doing it for the first time. Somebody invented something. They may have a patent around it. They have some type of safety or security around that idea that they've been able to put into play. And then, for me, innovation is applying it, making it actually work, taking that invention and having it be something that is actually useful, that's measurable, that has an impact in our world on the patient experience, on our provider's experience, on the cost of healthcare, on the access of
Yeah.
healthcare, all the different components that we deal with. Innovation, I think, is critical to move us from what I would say transitions into transformations, because every one of those innovations has the opportunity to have a large stair step to the next delivery or the next financing of healthcare. And one thing I will say, like how to take it and move it along, there's certain organizations, certain cultures that have that risk tolerance, that have the intellectual capital to be able to be innovative and to apply that and show you use cases, is imitation. There's nothing wrong with imitation. Take that
Yeah.
either in the industry or outside of industry and apply it towards you. You don't always have to be
Yeah.
first, but maybe you can be best. So if you take an idea that you're seeing in banking or an experience that you feel within retail and you apply that and bring that back into healthcare and into your markets, I can take that and I can build upon it. You can take it from me and build upon it. So really it's kind of more about the network, how to make sure that you are well networked to allow you access to people and ideas and thoughts that you can, consume within your organization and bring it to life. And you will have some failures every now and then. There's no doubt about it. You've got to learn from those. Don't forget about them, learn from them, don't repeat them. But for the most part,
Right.
when you start getting that culture in place and people to be forward thinking, what do you want it to look like in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? What do you want it to look like when your children become adults? Have that vision. And then that allows you then to accelerate the work to get it done and hopefully realize that vision within your lifetime.
Yeah, I know you said it so well. I mean, you explained invention versus innovation. That just like, the wheel is the invention, and then the horse drawn carriage is the innovation that used the invention to make it happen.
That's right.
And, you brought out a very important point where you said that, there's already invention that has happened. Adopt that invention from other industries, from financial or retail or wherever it is. And we are seeing that in healthcare today, aren't we? We're seeing so many people coming from these other organizations and bringing that change into healthcare. So it's really, really good to see that. And the third point you made, which I really looked, is that there is a risk associated with everything, but the higher the risk, the higher the reward too.
That's correct.
So it shouldn't, healthcare organizations shouldn't be worried about taking the risk, because you may leapfrog by taking that risk and bring about like orders of magnitude of change that could be beneficial to many.
Mhm.
So well. So I mean, you also mentioned about data, right? And I agree, we are moving from that analog phase to digital phase, but that digital phase is fraught with a lot of problems, in the sense that this data is like in so many different places, and this data is not talking to one another. It's spread over systems, and especially, in fact, since you say you're going through merger and acquisitions, is information that's sitting in different systems that needs to now come together. And since you're firsthand undergoing all of this, how do you bring all that information together? And what is available out there, and for people to bring this data, make it interoperable, make it such that you can get deeper insights from the data, and go to a point where you can tell people that they're going to have a condition in the future if they go on the same trajectory that they are currently.
Yeah, I love talking about the 3.0, the data and the digital world. It's very
Mhm.
exciting, and you have a great view of how we're bringing things together when mergers occur or when two companies come together, because you do have that potential interoperability issue of trying to normalize,
Mhm.
standardize, and merge and consume that data and bring it back out. I think most of us have seen the pyramid over our lifetime that talks about data, which is kind of individual facts that moves into information, which structures it and organizes it. Comes into knowledge, where there's ideas and learning, and then wisdom at the end, how you apply it in the
Mhm.
decision making. And that whole process all starts right with data. And that's what we produce as healthcare providers. We don't really make products, we don't really make widgets, we don't make something physical in many cases, but we do produce data. Then we organize that data, structure that data, present that data, and allow people to make decisions based upon that data, whether it's a patient doing self service work, whether it's a provider making a clinical decision, or whether it's the business office or something else on how to maybe propensity to pay or supply chain, and trying to make sure that we're just in time inventory with a lot of our work and how we do that distribution. So people use that data that we produce in order to move forward with their work and get that done. And when you look at companies coming together, the easy button, which in some cases is the most expensive button, is let's just all get on the same
Mhm.
car. Let's all drive the same car. So we'll all get on the
Right.
same EMR or the same ERP or the same this. And you see that happening a lot. And I applaud that. I think that is certainly one option. There's another option of
Mhm.
interoperability. Do you want to invest in that, or do you want to invest in actually trying to make those systems compatible, talk to each other to a level of intensity or a level of detail that'll actually allows you to make better clinical decisions because you're able to merge that information together and put it inside the workflow of a provider or the workflow of a self-service patient workflow that allows them then to be able to make the better decisions based upon the compilation of the data that you're gathering. When you move into that kind of a mindset, you start seeing how you can move into other parts of your community which in many cases will be on different systems, different platforms. Some of the self-initiated data, whether you wear a Fitbit or you're tracking your nutrition or your diet, or you're looking at going across, different acquisitions or mergers in the future, that as opposed to making the large investment on converting systems, you just kind of transition and make the data talk to each other. So that's a different option. I think it's one that we need to continue to pursue because the sources of data is much greater than the EMR. I mean, there's studies that have said, when you're taking care of a patient, the EMR data might be 25, 30% of all the data that you need. So there's a lot of things outside of that you need to bring in, the social determinants of health and some of the health pieces that I talked about, kind of bringing all that in. So I think it's really important to be a differentiator. It's going to be how you use the data. It's not going to be access to the data because we all have access to it. It's how you're going to use it. One thing that I like that's happening now that you're starting to see a lot more talk about, in some cases you could say it's part of the hype curve, is really kind of jumping from that data to the wisdom. And that's good doing artificial intelligence. That's using the machine to be able to interpret the data for you and start offering things up without you having to go through certain types of steps in order to make that happen. It can analyze and study the data and bring that back to you. I like to look at it in the simplest form as like a GPS system in your car. Historically, we could always go from point A to point B, the old-fashioned way with the map. And then we got a GPS, and we all had the little Garmin stuck on our windshield. And now there's intelligence built into it. So as opposed to maybe 9 out of 10 days, this is the route that I take, and it's the same route. There is a day, whether it's weather, whether it's the traffic, maybe there's an accident, that it's going to reroute me and say, oh, by the way, there is actually now a better way today than there was yesterday or even an hour ago to get to that end game. And the system does that for you. You don't have to know about it. You don't have to listen to the radio and, oh, there's an accident up here, or there's this happening, or there's construction over here. The system calculates that for you. That I think is really exciting because that helps kind of remove some of the steps and some of the delay of taking data and moving it into actionable events.
That is so amazing. I'm really looking forward to the day when I get a GPS for my health, not for my destination, right?
It's
I
coming.
would
It's
love
coming.
that. I think so. I think it's a brilliant idea. Yeah. I mean, we have to have that because it will tell me what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And if I continue on this path, where will I head? Right. And a lot of this, again, we were so happy when EMRs came out, right? Because that was like before that, there were like these paper dossiers, and now we had this electronic records. Of course, they were not accessible by the patients. The data was there, but we couldn't see it. We've changed that, and now we've got to a point where we have access to it. But still, like you said, the revenue data doesn't talk to clinical data, doesn't talk to your own personal data. And we need to, I think it took the pandemic to make us realize the deficiencies in the system and the transformation that we need to do digitally. And so really, looks like we still have some miles to go here, but thanks to people like you who are constantly working on this, I think we have way forward, and we hope to get there soon, right? You've always worked for a hospital system, and I see hospitals as nonprofit organizations, and they, like you said, yours is faith-based, and or they may be as county-based, like probably Atrium and North Carolina, I guess, South Carolina. I can't remember which one, but
No,
North Carolina. And the idea is to serve the people. You really want your population to be healthy. And so they're set up as nonprofit organizations, but at the end of the day, they have to be run as a business too, right? And the financials have to match up. The organizations have to make money, they have to be cost effective and still provide great service. So a lot of this is like, opposites. You've got to make money, but you've got to be altruistic. You have to be cost effective, you have to provide great service. And you mentioned that technology can be like the great divider. So how can technology impact this, and how is technology today helping the business of healthcare?
yeah, that's a great question. The financing of healthcare is certainly something that has been on top of people's minds for many years. One thing I will say, as we continue to develop these tools and continue to digitize and promote engagement, one thing we do have to recognize is the inequities that we do have in healthcare. and that we have a digital divide. We have those that do have access to the internet, they do have handhelds, they do have some of the technology that we're building. Then we have those that don't. So first and foremost, we have to put everybody on a level playing field. We have to solve for the inequities of the healthcare delivery that we have today. Assuming we start progressing more in that manner, what I would say is the piece that we would start focusing on is that's what I'm so excited about. The value component is really that expense side of healthcare. One of the most underutilized resources that we have in healthcare is the patient. So if you go back and you think about how you used to interact with banking, we all used to go into a bank, into a branch. We would wait in line. We would talk to clerks. We would write checks. We would get cash after talking to a person. And you saw over time all that become automated. And that's the same thing that we have to do here. We have to continue to evolve into something that is a lot more digitally engaged, less human impact in terms of the resource that it takes to perform that task, provide the patient with the right tools that he or she needs. So I do all my banking on my phone now. There's no reason why I can't do a majority of my healthcare on my phone. It can remind me of bills. It can remind me when I need to take a pill. All the different things that we see in our other life, we need to start applying that into healthcare. You're really moving that forward. And that's where value becomes so important, because other industries, and you hear it every day, you've heard it, they're going to raise their prices. This is going up. Inflation's going up. The price of gas is going up. Well, we don't have that luxury. Our revenue stream, for the most part, is fairly fixed. And so what we have to do is we have to be more efficient and more effective with the care that we're delivering. And that goes back into being proactive, preventive, providing people with the tools that we talked about so they can help manage their own disease or chronic illness. Those are things that we need to focus on, is really kind of putting those tools into the hands of those with the devices, and those without devices, we need to get them devices. That digital divide has to collapse so we can utilize this technology for the benefit of all of our populations that we're serving. And that, to me, is where value comes into play. On the back end side, there's things that are coming out that we're starting to use the last few years. One I will mention will be robotic process automation. There's a lot of voice processing too in terms of contact centers. So you look at robotic process automation, that really is taking, it's kind of digitizing your workforce. It's taking the redundant tasks that people have, which really doesn't provide in many cases a lot of enjoyment or thrill of going into work, and it's having the system do that for you. You don't need a human now to do that. You start looking at, putting those things into the patient's hands. They now can perform that task for you better, faster, cheaper. They can do it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I'll wake up at 3 a.m. I can order my refills. I don't have to wait till 8 to 5 and call the provider. So I think there's a lot of opportunity on the expense side of healthcare for us to continue to focus on, to be more efficient. And one of those is getting those tools in the hands of the patients.
That's right. That's right. Putting the patient to the center of care, putting the tools, giving them the right technology in order to transform the way we did healthcare. And transformation in healthcare, as you said, is lagging. It's not been easy. It took a little longer than it did in the other industries. And where do you see the roadblocks there? What do you think needed to change? Because you talked about a lot of different things, and yet healthcare is improving, but it's still not at pace at the other industries. Is it regulatory? Is it compliance? Is it something else?
Well, I think from a transform, to me, it's the incentives. It's what we're incentivized to do. And that'll go back to the population health and the value base. If the financing of healthcare, of how we pay for healthcare, as those incentives continue to shift and change, and if they change dramatically, you will see our delivery system change dramatically as well. That's why I like the visionaries and the thought leaders of those that have moved into value and continue to move into value quicker, to take that risk and learn from that, teach others how to do it, and really become that model healthcare system for hopefully our whole industry, so that as our grandchildren kind of come into this world, that they will have a whole different way of how they access healthcare, how they're being provided for, how they're cared for. You got genomics into play. You got a lot of opportunities to really be preventive, to be proactive, to be on top, and to help people guide or navigate through it. It always kind of looks at me, it bothers me a little bit when people say they have navigators, because we made the system complex. that somebody has to help me
Mhm.
go from point A to point B, or here's where you have to be intersected. Here's where you go to this clinic or go see this provider. Those things should all be very intuitive. The system should flow me through, should guide me through that without having humans to do that. We don't do that in other industries. We have things that help us get there. And I like your idea about, just if we can think
Mhm.
of, you know, having the GPS for health. How can
Yeah.
we help people make better decisions? In most cases, they will make the right decision if they had the right information at the time that they're making
Mhm.
that decision. So it has to be in their workflow. So if they're ordering the pizza or they're eating the tuna, at that time, the system will guide them as to what the outcomes of those decisions will be so that he or she can make those right decisions. So if we look at like in 5 years, 10 years, or maybe again, go back to see what the next generation
Mhm.
we want to live behind for them, I think that will be a motivation enough for us to really transform this industry to be much different. Just like retail is so much different than what it was even 5 years ago. Banking is so much different than what it was even 5 years ago. And to the earlier point about the pandemic, I think that opened up that we have a lot of opportunity, a lot of low hanging fruit to be totally different than what we were 5 years ago as well.
Yeah. No, this has been a great conversation. I didn't even know where the time flew and learned so much new
And
from you, as I'm sure our viewers will too. And before I ended, I just wanted to bring up one more thing that you alluded to earlier, like about your sabbatical. You said you'll talk a little bit more about it later. So tell us, how was that, right? What did you discover in your sabbatical? And um, tell us more. Yeah.
yeah, it was a fun. I took 12 years actually, or 12 months off exactly. I did some
Wow.
things that I have never done before. I did some work
Mhm.
over in Asia for another healthcare system. So I spent a few weeks out there with a couple of peers of mine who then became friends, and I got to see a whole different way of how healthcare was being delivered. I took a couple of pleasure trips, out to Hawaii, and did a couple of things of that
Uh-huh.
nature that I had not done before. And really, it was a nice refresh. And plus, what it did for me is made me realize I really want to get back into healthcare, into the provider side of healthcare, to be in the complex component and how we look to try to simplify it and really try to change healthcare. I talked earlier about my three sons, and ironically, all three of my sons are in healthcare. So it's a kind of a
Oh,
little family thing. We can talk business at the same time that we're talking family and pleasure. So it's really kind of interesting. And I will tell you, what you learn is you learn that people see things from the different lenses, even those that you've seen grow out
mhm,
throughout their whole lives. They don't see things the same way you see things. And it's great to see others people's visions of what this should look like when they have a critical eye on something. Oh, I may have missed that. So those optics are really fun. And that 12 months was a great relief for me and allowed me to restructure, refocus, and also have a little bit of
mhm,
pleasure in there because I enjoy my work.
mhm,
I love my work. And so from that standpoint, you can almost say
mhm.
I'm 724 at my role. However,
Yes.
taking that break was nice. And plus going to other parts of
Yeah,
the world and seeing how healthcare was delivered. Even did a little thing
I know.
in Belize and saw a little bit of action there as well in a
Wow.
previous life. So those are all things that are just opened your eyes as to what we have and what we can do.
It makes you think differently. And I mean, just like what you said today, this, you gave us a lot of information, but I think we need to have you back again to talk about how healthcare is different across the world. That's a whole another topic we could do. Or about mergers and acquisitions. I know you're going through one and you cannot talk about it right now, but hopefully, soon we would like to bring you back and talk about that in greater detail. So, thank you, Craig, for taking the time to chat with us today and for sharing your knowledge in healthcare on the pros and cons of innovation versus invention. It was truly informative and eye opening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I'm privileged here. So, and to the audience that we have with us today, I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And thank you for listening. Don't forget to check the show notes for links or resources and contact information related to today's show. And stay tuned for more Care is One podcasts and discussions on trending healthcare topics that you care about. Send in your suggestions on speakers and topics, and we will try to accommodate them. Thank you and have a great day.